underlying all the things that we do, he believes that the principle stands that we do not have to do anything. So he holds up this example in the book of this one guy, a student in a university, who went to his professor, and he said, the author of the book, and said, "Hey, professor, I have to miss class on Saturday because I have a tennis match out of town. And so I have to miss class." And the professor looked at him and said, "You don't have to do anything. You chose to be part of the tennis team, and now you're choosing to go to that tournament because it's part of your responsibilities. And it's a very good and correct decision to do that, but you don't have to do anything." Really holding up this belief and this Catholic teaching of our free will and our intellect, of our rational being. That this being proactive, as the author talks about, is moving from the mindset that there are so many things imposed upon me that I have to do, moving to the mindset of I can choose to do the thing in front of me, choosing to do the thing in front of me. So I'm driving back and I get to Nebraska City, and it was that Saturday a couple of weeks ago where it was like super snowy, but it was like that wet snow. It was super heavy. Everything was messy and sloshy and gross. And I get back to the parish, and there was a prayer group going on in the church, and the sidewalks were just like a mess. And I'm like, oh man, I gotta go clean this, like otherwise people are gonna fall when they come out of this thing and whatever. So I go, and it's heavy snow and it's not that much of sidewalk, but I'm sitting there and I was just scooping, right? And I'm like, ugh, why am I doing this? Like, I have so much to do and I have to go do all these other things. And like, why didn't someone inside, when they came to the meeting, like, did they not see that all the snow? Like, why didn't there's shovels right here? Why didn't they do it? Blah, 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 blah. Right? You ever been there? Like, why didn't everyone read my mind and do what I wanted? Right? I didn't reach out. I didn't tell anyone anything. Why don't they just know? Right? So that's where I was, right? and then I remembered, right? I remembered just that podcast that I listened to, 30 minutes before. I have like a goldfish memory, but I remembered it, right? And in that moment, I'm like, I don't have to do this. It's the right thing to do. It's the good thing to do as a pastor, to take care of this place and take care of my people. Okay, I'm going to choose to do this. And it really subtly just reframed everything and switched my mindset and my heart. And so I think there is a lot of wisdom here for us, no matter what our vocation is. That certainly in many ways, as a priest, you don't fully understand married life, but there are so many parallels between the two in choosing to love, because anytime that God calls us to a vocation, he's calling us to come outside of ourselves. He's calling us in the way that he knows us, as we are made in his image and likeness, and uniquely ourselves. He's called us to vocations that will help us to become holy and will help us get to heaven. And that's primary. Hopefully, yes, also, if we're married, to help our spouse get to heaven, to help our kids get to heaven. But principally, as Jesus looks at us, it's for ourselves to get to heaven. That one time, a friend of mine was in seminary. He's a priest now, but he was really struggling with his vocation. He's like, I just, I don't know if this is really for me. And he was sitting down with the spiritual director, and he was just like, yeah, I don't know if I can do this and this part of the priesthood. This part seems hard. I don't really know if God could call me to this, blah, 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 blah. And the priest looked at him and said, have you ever thought that maybe God's calling you to be a priest, to first and foremost get your sorry butt to heaven? It's like, huh, okay. All right. Well, and so that's the focus, right, of our vocation as Jesus sees it, that he's called us. That's vocation means to call. He's called you to marriage. He's called me to the priesthood, principally to get us to heaven. And so as we receive that call, can I choose what is in front of me to respond yes in that moment, to say yes to my vocation, but then to say yes again and again and again? Because, a mom's burden is real. A friend of mine had her first child almost like a year ago, a little over a year ago. And she had her first child like a little later. She was like 37 or something. And she had her baby, everything was going great, and then she got sick, like the flu, like really bad, all that, great. So much so that she was so dehydrated, she had to go to the doctor, and she was like, this was the hardest point in my life, that I'm like sitting there and I have to care for this baby who can't take care of itself. I can't move, right? You guys been there ever, right? Like, and he needs me to eat, and I'm sitting there, and so she went into her doctor and she said, Doc, like, how do moms do this? Like, how do moms do this? Like, I'm like broken. I can't rest. I can't sleep to take care of myself. What do I do? And what do moms do? And he looked at her and said, they don't take care of themselves. They just come in. They come in broken and beaten up, and I try and do the best I can. Right? Right? Like, man, okay. And so all of the things that come with our vocation, it has its challenges, and being a mom has its challenges. Last night I was with some friends, a few couples, and I was asking them, like, hey, like, what? I'm giving this retreat tomorrow. What do you think I should say? Or whatever. And one of the guys, completely joking, said, mom's retreat, being a mom's not that hard. Try being a dad. And his wife stabbed him with a fork, right? And he's a really good dude, and he was completely kidding. But there's a real heroism in your life. And I really want you to receive that there's a real heroism in just being a mom. And the ways that God calls you to do that, however many kids he blesses you with, however he chooses to bless you with children, whether you're called to work or to stay home, whatever way he calls you to do it, it's a beautiful thing. And it's heroic. And so often we can get anxious about it. Like, am I doing enough? Am I doing this right? Is just being a mom important enough? And actually, there's not much more beautiful things in the world than being a mom. You get to bring life into the world. You get to care for life. You get to welcome new life into your home in a way that no one else can. And in that heroism, in that daily choosing, in that daily yes, to move from that, like, I have to do this, to I choose to do this, there's an unleashing of love into the world that goes beyond just your family. And certainly, yes, it affects your family, it affects your own heart, it affects your marriage, but it goes beyond that. And it unleashes this love into the world. It unleashes a love into the world. Because in that, like, in those heroic small moments, like, I have to make dinner right now. No, you don't. You don't have to make dinner. Well, if I don't do it, no one will. Yep. But you don't have to. Kids can starve. Yeah, but then they'll starve. Yep. But you don't have to, right? Then CPS will get called. Yep. But you don't have to, right? You don't have to choose to. And that can sound pithy and small, but the framework, just seeing life through that lens changes a lot. It changes a lot. And I know we all get to that point where we're like frustrated and like, ugh. And I'm like, oh, I have to do it. And I grumble. But in that moment, can I say, Jesus, you called me to this vocation and I said yes to it. And now I choose to say yes to it again and again and again. And to let that love be unleashed over and over and over again in that heroism. Blaise Pascal once said that, no, it's not him. Jean Corbon, who is this priest, who wrote a book called The Wellspring of Mercy. It's really beautiful. But he says that there's no more fruitful human activity than receiving the love of God. There's no more fruitful human activity than receiving love. And we look at Mary's example, and that's what we see. Like, in Mary is the perfect model of discipleship, the perfect example of motherhood, the perfect example of what it means to be a woman. And there in that place when God calls her, she says, yes, let it be done unto me according to thy word. And she receives, as we talked about last talk, that love of God into her heart. And there's fruit there. Jesus, the Son of God, is brought into the world. There is no more fruitful human activity than first and foremost receiving God and receiving wherever he calls us to be. Now, like I said, even in that example of like getting beat up and kind of bruised by the things and being exhausted and tired and just at a point of like, man, it's hard to go on sometimes, or it's difficult some days. Like God sees all of that. He sees your burden as moms. He sees the joy as moms. And yes, there is this, of course, we need boundaries. And there's this whole movement of self-care, which has its place for sure. Like we all need a break every once in a while. We all need to do things that bring us life, enjoy. That's all good. But first and foremost, what we're called to do is to be a gift. Self-care is a good thing, but it can go too far. And anytime that and so maybe a check of this, like, how do I know when I'm just saying yes to my vocation? How do I know when I'm like just living into it? Pay attention to your heart. Are you turned outward towards others and upward towards God? Or are you turned in on yourself? Am I turned outward and upward, or am I turned inward? Because a healthy person, if we're living in communion, we're turned outward and upward. We're turned upward towards God and outward towards others. And I'm giving and I'm receiving and I'm living in that relationship and I'm making that relational choice. And I really like that phrase. As we talked about relationship identity, and mission, to live in a relationship, we have to make the choice to. So I not only choose to choosing the task in front of me, I don't have to, I choose to, but I also choose to be in relationship. And even that in and of itself is a relational choice, because making the relational choice is fighting against our temptation to turn inward. It's fighting our temptation to grasp. We talked about last time that a woman is so beautifully made to receive love naturally and just in her very makeup. And so therefore Satan, his principal temptation towards woman is going to be to not receive, but to grasp for control. That's a principal temptation. Oftentimes in women's hearts is when I feel off kilter, well, I have to start grasping for control. I can't trust enough to just receive his love. I have to do something. I have to grasp, which again, puts us back in that pendulum. But when I'm able to just receive and then living in that dynamic of receiving God's love and then letting it pour through me and out, I'm going to live in that freedom. John Paul II, as you're going to see in your questions there, that, he says that, it's in a document of the church, but he wrote it. And it says, man is the only being that was created for himself and can only find himself in a sincere gift of self. You need that repeated? I can't. Just look on your sheet. But no, I can't. That we really only find ourselves in that sincere gift of self. And I know you've experienced that. Those times when it's like, who am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to do? Who are you calling me to be? And then the baby cries, or there's something going on in the family, and you respond, and you remember who you are. And you remember who you were called to be. And you begin to understand your heart and who you are more and more and more and more. We find ourselves by giving ourselves away. This seems contradictory, but it's the truth. And I think it's something that we only find and experience, and we're going to find that in our vocation. And so as we go forward and we're doing this, and as we're living this, and we're striving to choose what's in front of us, to remember that you are not a victim of your circumstances. You're a daughter of God, and our God, our Father, reigns victorious. His Son, is seated on the throne, and on account of our baptism, we're incorporated into all of that. You're not a victim. You're a daughter who's loved. And so remember to ask for the graces that you need, especially when those moments are hard. And remember the grace of the sacrament of marriage principle. Because if you have been called to a vocation, if that's where Jesus has directed you for your own sanctification, that he will never leave you orphans. He doesn't just say, okay, I called you to this marriage. Okay, good luck. Bye. I'm out. No, Jesus is there. And those graces of marriage aren't just there at the moment of exchanging the vows, but they're there to be called upon at every moment. I was like to say there's like a bubble of grace around a couple, always. And those graces are in God's economy are only there for those who ask and for those who accept. And so it's a powerful prayer. From the grace of the sacrament of matrimony which I have received, help me to love this child in this way. Help me to love my husband right now. Help me to be faithful to whatever I've been called to do today. Whatever it is, help me to do the task with joy. Help me to choose what's in front of me with peace. From the grace of the sacrament of marriage that I've received. Those graces are there, but they're only for the asking. They're only for those who are accessing them. They don't just come out of nowhere, because God's a gentleman and he never forces himself. Gentleman, and he offers, and we receive, and we ask. And so that's a big part of it. And then as we go forward and we're striving to live our vocation, as we're asking for the graces of the sacraments, remember who your enemy is. Remember who your enemy is. Yesterday, I went and celebrated a mass and did a burial for some friends of mine who just had a miscarriage a couple weeks ago. And as we were burying the little one and blessing the grave, and I'm sure this is sensitive for a lot of people, so sorry if this touches any place, but just the Lord may be tender there. But we were walking away from laying him to rest, and the wife looked at me and, emotional and grieving, and she looked and she said, miscarriage is the worst thing. It's no one's fault, and it's just purely the fall, right? Our fallen human nature. The results of that original sin, the results of sin entering the world is sickness and death. And in some beautiful way, her words just struck my heart. And because it paints that picture of who is our enemy. Our enemy is Satan himself. And there's something really powerful there for us to remember, ladies, that who is our enemy? Our enemy is Satan. He's the one who hates us. He's the one who wants to destroy us. And so often we get worked up or we get angry at other people, and we place the blame on them because we expect everything should be perfect. But the fact of the matter is we live in a fallen world, that the church does not teach here and now that there is ever going to be a utopia on this earth. The utopia is only in heaven. But the problem is when we expect things to be a utopia and they're not, and we forget that we're fallen, then it must be someone else's fault. If it's possible that this world is perfect and my family's perfect and my neighborhood and my parish are perfect, if that's possible and it's not actually happening, then it means it's someone's fault. Their fault, or their fault, or their fault, or this group of people's fault. And we start casting blame, right? My family's not perfect. Well, it's my fault, or it's my husband's fault, or it's this kid's fault. And again, this isn't to dismiss our personal sin. Like, we all have stuff we need to work on, but principally, the enemy is Satan. And we remember that we are fallen, and he's there and he's just trying to destroy us. He hates us, and he hates the beautiful families that you all have. He hates them. And he hates your faithfulness, and he hates the ways that you continue to cry out to God and seek him even in the hardest moments. He hates all of that. And he wants to destroy. And so he pits us against each other, and we lose sight of who the true enemy is. And so I want to leave you today with just that reminder to be really aware of that, and not in an obsessive way, and not in a way that takes away your peace, but simply to say when those lies start coming of self-accusation or self-reliance, when those lies that really break you down start coming, to just remember to reject them in Jesus's name. And they're not your husband's fault oftentimes. Oftentimes they're not your fault or your mom's fault. They're Satan's. And so let's name it. And bringing that to the light is really, really, really powerful. And that can bring a lot of healing and peace. Because what it does is we would just reject what comes from the enemy, and then we place our eyes back on the one who loves us. And we say, Jesus, this is not of you. What is from you? How do you see me? And what do you want me to receive from you? We reframe the question. We reframe our lens. We reframe our life. And we remind ourselves whose we are. And that the truth that I read at the beginning of this talk, that all things work for the good of those who believe in Jesus. All things, the hard stuff, the suffering, all of those things, because our God is so good, work for your good because you believe in him. Stay faithful to your vocation. Stay faithful to the Lord. Ask for all the graces that you need, and he's going to do beautiful things. Thank you for coming on this day, giving the Lord this time. May he bless you and all your families abundantly.